Thank you. Good evening, Board. As you may have heard, there's a legislative session happening right now. Dr. Cleveland has been heavily involved in advocating for you and school districts in Arkansas and Little Rock every week. One of the things about a legislative session is even though some pieces of legislation have passed, nothing is final until the legislative session is final. So rather than going through all of the pieces of legislation that have passed, I wanted to just give you kind of an update on the big piece of legislation that everyone is talking about and reading about, and that's the LEARNS Act. As you know, the governor signed that 144-page piece of legislation into law last week. There are lots of pieces to it, lots of moving parts. The day it was filed, we were diving in, reading through it, asking questions, marking things that we didn't understand, and we continue to have a lot of questions. The different thing about the LEARNS legislation than what we have typically seen in Arkansas is usually state legislature, at least here in Arkansas, kind of passes little pieces of legislation all along, and it fits together in this package at the end of the session. The LEARNS Act is a big, huge omnibus bill. So we're adjusting to exactly what that means. The other very unique thing, which makes it kind of difficult to start running on what the new legislation means, is a lot of the details of the LEARNS Act were left to be developed in rules and regulations. Typically, the Arkansas legislature has lined out a lot of those details in the legislation, so when the rule process comes, we mostly know what the rules are going to be. That's just not the case with LEARNS. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, even though I think everybody on our team wants to start running and wants to start implementing and getting things done. We know that if we get too far out in front of the rule process, there's a chance we're stepping back and having to redo things. So what we are doing is just today, actually, the Department of Education published an opportunity for people to apply to be a part of the rulemaking work groups. They're really going to work on the front end to try to get some of that input in the drafting of the rules, with the idea that that will speed the rulemaking process along. So I know Dr. Cleveland, myself, Ms. Tischer, Ms. Fink, Dr. Smith, whoever we can get to throw our name in the hat to get our voice at the table on those rules. We're going to make an effort to do that. Just a note about the rulemaking process. Rulemaking is not fast. So even the least controversial rule that gets almost zero public input, I would say is about a 6-month implementation period. So I don't know if we've talked about this before. If we have, it's been a while. For the department to make a rule, they first write it, send it to their state board to go out for public comment. The public comment period has to be at least 30 days, and then they come back and look at those public comments. If there are changes, substantial changes that are made based on the public comment, they send it back out for public comment again. So then that's another 30-day period. So once they get through the back and forth of public comment, it goes back to the state board. State board approves it for final approval, and then sends it to the legislature for approval. At some point in the process, the governor's office is also approving that. And then after the legislature approves, it goes into effect, I believe, 30 days after that. So you can see that it's not a fast process. There is an emergency rulemaking process. We've heard that they're not going to exercise that option. I'm not really clear on the details of why. Excuse me. But again, just kind of laying out expectations that we do not have the answers today, and it may be a little bit before we get the answers. We'll continue to monitor all the legislation, and once the legislative session is over, we can give you a bit more of a play-by-play on exactly what's out there. What questions do you have?
So with that rulemaking process and the time windows, you're likely not hitting any of next year's school.
Yes, that's correct. Which makes me a little bit nervous, obviously. I would say at the earliest, we'll get the first rules, either right as school is starting or into the fall. And then, of course, the rules will affect what your policies are, so we'll have to go through that process too. So it's hard to look at starting school under new legislation.
Basically gonna have a year without any of this Learns Act impacting school change, any change in.
A lot of the pieces of it potentially. I feel like it's just going to kind of be a year of in limbo of what rules are we operating by. But the good thing is all the school districts are in the same boat. So I know that Dr. Cleveland and his colleagues at AAEA will be, making some decisions to try to have the best that, each superintendent and district can do, kind of a collective effort.
What we do know is we're gonna show up and have school, buses are gonna run, we're gonna pay our bills, we're gonna focus on kids. And that's our main focus. And I know that's yours, and you won't let us stray from that. And I appreciate that.
Will different pieces of the bill be rolled out at different times? I mean, if it takes different amount of time for rules and regs to be approved, they're not all going to be approved at the same time, right?
Right. I think it'll be piece by piece. I think we'll see some initial policy changes that are relatively easy and routine that can be done. And then as the rules come, we'll follow in behind them and update our rules. And then there's some things that will not have rules that we'll be able to implement more quickly. But again, it's just kind of, getting our bearings and making sure that we're not jumping out too far ahead of what we know is coming. But I'm sure you're going to start getting lots of questions from community members. We're getting lots of questions from staff about what does this mean? What does this mean for kind of their whole world of employment? And we'll do our best to share out information and be as transparent as possible as soon as we're able to.
That was my question, because I've had lots of, especially educator friends, reach out and kind of not quite panicking, but almost panicking about some of the things that it says, and I just wondered, what kind of communication are we sending out to say, the buses are gonna run, we're gonna teach the kids, we're gonna pay the bills, we're gonna get there, but I don't know, I know one of the biggest concerns I heard was that the salary steps are not required anymore. So and I kept saying, I can't imagine that we're gonna take all that away.
Yeah, do you want to comment?
Part of that is tonight too, when you don't have really solid information and you put something out, even in writing, there could be different iterations coming as more information comes available. And so I've been wanting to really try to help our Springdale family understand that they're still our Springdale family. And we're going to do everything we can, not only as a board, but as administration, all the way down to whoever's employed by this district, that you're still employed by this district. And we care about you, and we're going to take care of you like you take care of our kids, and we take care of each other. The thing is, we don't know how the Department of Education and the legislature will create different circumstances that change the way we do our work. That's why I say we're still going to have kids come every day. Our children and our teachers really we don't want them to feel impacted in any way by the legislation, other than more support. So I'm not sure how we go there, Ms. Creek. I just know that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And
that's what I keep saying. Springdale's they're gonna take care of you. You're gonna be fine.
we're going to all work together. It's going to take a little bit,
I even told a Fayetteville teacher that, because she was, saying stuff to me, and I said, well, I'm just gonna tell you, Springdale's gonna take care of our teachers, which means Fayetteville's gonna have to take care of theirs. Or they'll all come over here.
And another piece of it too that all plays into it is they're still working on the foundation funding amounts and talking all the adequacy pieces. And so that obviously plays a really big role on, how and what and when we do things. So those discussions are happening as well, which of course feeds all of this.
Well, that's going to trigger the execution of the ability to manage with the access, the funding, right?
Yeah. That was my
Yeah,
thinking.
one would think, right?
Yeah,
When we're
can't-
rule
one
making-
can't be without one or the other.
Right.
And in the rulemaking process, if you get to a part that's just impossible to implement, like, this is like a really ignorant legislative overall question, but like, is there a point where we could go back, or the legislature could go back and say, hey, that's not gonna work after all, we're gonna have to change that? Like, can it be amended at this point?
Sure. I mean, it can still be amended even now because the session is still pending. And then there is always an opportunity for special sessions that the governor is able to call. There'll be a fiscal session a year from now that sometimes can and does have some cleanup language. So yes, there will be opportunities. And I'm hopeful that because of the flexibility that has been given in the rulemaking process, that if there are some things that just don't work when it's actually having to be implemented, that the department will be granted that flexibility that I think's there in those rules. So yes, there is opportunity to go back and amend.
Our legislature did that with the school calendar. Realized there was a mistake. Said, hey, let's fix this. I have confidence that they want school to happen.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Just thank you, board, for being engaged. I know you all are actively working, talking. You've even been there. So thanks for all you're doing to help support your kids in Springdale.
Dr. Cleveland and board, if I could just make a few more comments about the legislative session. In a typical legislative session, one of the things that we are always looking for is how much is our foundation funding going up? And the LEARNS Act doesn't have anything about foundation funding and what it's increasing in it. So we are still anxiously awaiting that. The one piece of information in the LEARNS Act that impacts districts that we've seen a spreadsheet on is the to get districts to either $50,000 on their base or $2,000 increase for all staff if you're already at $50,000. Now, I say that, but it's only certified staff, and it's only certified staff that are not paid with federal funds, okay? So it's not all of our staff. So there is nothing in the LEARNS Act for classified employees increases. So we're anxiously awaiting to see what the change will be in foundation funding to see what that allows. So anyway, it's a new year, a new session for us, I'll tell you that.